The gavel came down, sharp, cold, final. I stood up, alone. No attorney beside me, no leather briefcase, no whispered advice telling me what to say next. Across the courtroom, my husband leaned back in his chair. Tailored suit, 2 expensive lawyers at his side. And then he laughed. Not a polite smile, not nervous laughter. The kind of laugh that comes from a man who believes the outcome is already decided. I could feel it behind me. The murmurs, the sideways glances, the quiet judgment. They had already chosen who would win. The judge looked at me over his glasses. "Are you certain you want to represent yourself today?" I nodded. No hesitation, because no one in that room knew what I knew. No one knew what had been taken from me. No one knew what I had learned in silence, and no one knew that his smile was about to disappear. My husband was still laughing. He thought I was reckless. He thought I was desperate. He thought I had come here to lose, publicly and quietly. But there was one thing he didn't understand. I didn't walk into that courtroom to beg for justice. I walked in to place the truth on the table and let the very system he trusted turn against him. And that was only the beginning. The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold air. Everything felt permanent in that room. The benches, the seal on the wall, the silence that pressed down on your chest if you breathed too loudly. My name was called. I stepped forward. My husband didn't. He stayed seated, relaxed, one arm draped over the back of his chair, whispering something to the man on his left. Both lawyers smiled, not at me, at each other, like this was already over. The judge flipped through the file, page after page, a pause. Then he looked up. "Counsel for the respondent?" One of the lawyers stood immediately, confident, smooth. "Good morning, Your Honor." He spoke like he had done this 1,000 times because he had. The judge nodded and turned to my side of the room. "And the petitioner?" Every head turned toward me. I took one step forward. "I'm representing myself, Your Honor." There it was again. The laugh, this time louder. My husband didn't even try to hide it. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, shaking his head like he had just heard a bad joke. One of his lawyers smirked. The other raised an eyebrow, almost impressed by my audacity. The judge glanced at my husband. "Sir, this is a courtroom." "Sorry, Your Honor," my husband said, still smiling. "It's just unexpected." Unexpected. That was the word he always used when I did something without his permission. The judge turned back to me. "Ms. Carter," he said, reading from the file, "this case involves substantial marital assets, complex financial disclosures. Are you sure you wish to proceed without counsel?" I could feel the weight of the room again, everyone waiting for me to back down. I didn't. "Yes, Your Honor." A beat. The judge sighed, not annoyed, concerned. "Very well," he said, "but understand this court will hold you to the same standards as any attorney." My husband laughed again, a short one, sharp. "Of course," I said. "That's exactly what I'm asking for." That made him stop, just for half a second. Proceedings began. His lawyer spoke first. He painted a clean picture, a cooperative husband, a fair offer, a wife who had been emotionally overwhelmed by the divorce. I noticed the words he chose, emotionally, overwhelmed. They were careful not to say unstable, not yet. I stood there, hands clasped, listening. My husband watched me like I was an exhibit, occasionally shaking his head, occasionally smiling toward the judge as if to say, "You see what I've been dealing with." When it was my turn, I stepped forward again. No notes in my hands. I could feel his confidence growing. I could almost hear what he was thinking. She has nothing. She didn't prepare. She's going to embarrass herself. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I began, "before we discuss settlement offers, I'd like to clarify something." His lawyer stiffened slightly. "What would that be?" the judge asked. "The financial disclosures submitted by the respondent," I said, "specifically the timeline." The room shifted, not dramatically, Just enough. The judge glanced down at the documents again. Go on. I'm not disputing the numbers, I said carefully. I'm disputing when they were reported. My husband leaned back, crossing his arms, confident. His lawyer smiled. Your Honor, the lawyer said smoothly, my client has been fully transparent. I'm sure, I said, turning toward him for the first time. That's why I'd like to ask a few questions. The lawyer blinked. The judge raised a hand. She's allowed to ask, he said. I felt it then, the first crack. Not in the case, in my husband's certainty. He sat up straighter. His smile faded into something tighter, controlled. I hadn't revealed anything yet. I hadn't accused anyone. But I had done something far more dangerous. I had shown the room that I knew where to look, and as I stepped back to my seat, I noticed something else. From the last row of the courtroom, someone was watching me, not with curiosity, not with judgment, with recognition. People think control looks loud. It doesn't. It looks like a husband smiling across a dinner table saying, I'll handle it. You don't need to worry. That was how it started. Small things at first. He paid the bills, managed the accounts, streamlined everything, he said. It sounded responsible, loving even. Whenever I asked questions, he laughed. You hate numbers, he'd say. Why stress yourself out? So I stopped asking. When we bought the house, the paperwork went across the table toward him. When we opened new accounts, his name went first. When investments were discussed, he told me it was too complicated. I believed him, because trusting your husband doesn't feel like a mistake while you're doing it. It feels like marriage. The control deepened quietly. If I needed money, I didn't reach for my card. I asked, not directly, never directly. Do you think we can afford this? Is it okay if I replace my laptop? He never said no outright. He'd sigh, check his phone, shake his head like the weight of the world sat on his shoulders. You don't see the full picture, he'd say, but I'll make it work. And just like that, gratitude replaced autonomy. By the time I noticed something was wrong, it wasn't about money anymore. It was about permission. When I talked about going back to school, he smiled thinly. At our age? Why would you put yourself through that? When I mentioned meeting a financial advisor, he laughed outright. We don't need outsiders, he said. Everything we have is because I know what I'm doing. I remember the first time I checked our statements myself. Late at night, the house quiet, my heart pounding like I was doing something illegal. The numbers didn't make sense. Transfers I didn't recognize. Accounts I didn't know existed. When I asked him the next morning, he didn't yell. He looked disappointed. That's private, he said calmly. You shouldn't dig around like that. I apologized. I don't even remember why. At some point, I stopped seeing myself as an equal. I became a liability, a risk. That was when the language changed. He started using words like emotional, sensitive, overreacting, not to my face, to other people. Friends would tilt their heads when they talked to me, ask if I was doing okay. I didn't realize it then, but he was laying groundwork. By the time he asked for the divorce, everything was already arranged. Lawyers lined up, accounts locked, a narrative prepared, and I was standing there, with nothing in my name and a reputation he had been quietly rewriting for years. That was the version of me he expected to show up in court, confused, unprepared, grateful for whatever he decided to leave me. What he didn't expect was that I had finally started paying attention, and somewhere in the back of that courtroom, someone else recognized the pattern too. The divorce wasn't a conversation, it was a notice. He didn't sit me down, didn't explain, didn't argue. One afternoon, I came home to changed locks, just like that. My key didn't turn. The door didn't budge. I stood there with groceries in my hands, staring at a house that had been mine for over a decade. His voice came through the door, calm, controlled. I left your things in the garage. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Inside the garage, my life was stacked in cardboard boxes, clothes, old photos, A few kitchen items he decided I was allowed to keep. The rest, he said, was marital property. That night, my bank card declined. Once, then again. I checked my phone. No notifications, no warnings, just zero access. When I called him, it went straight to voicemail. When I called the bank, they told me politely that my name was no longer authorized on the account. I remember sitting on the edge of the motel bed staring at the wall. The room smelled like bleach and stale air, the kind of place people stay when they don't want to be seen. That was when the fear settled in. Not panic. Panic passes. This was slower, heavier. I tried to hire a lawyer the next morning. The first consultation went quiet the moment I explained my situation. They already retained counsel, she said carefully, and without access to funds, her voice trailed off. The second lawyer didn't even sugarcoat it. With your financial position, he said, you're at a disadvantage. Disadvantage, that was a gentle word for what it was. I wasn't just broke, I was blocked. Every account, every document, every record that could prove my contribution to our life together was suddenly out of reach. He had planned this. The realization hit me somewhere between the motel parking lot and the gas station. This wasn't anger. It wasn't impulse. It was strategy. When the court papers arrived, they were thick, precise, cold. His legal team had framed me perfectly. A wife who hadn't worked consistently. A woman who relied on her husband financially. Someone who struggled under stress. They didn't accuse me of anything directly. They didn't need to. They let implication do the work. By the time the hearing date was set, I had two options: accept whatever he offered or walk into court alone. He expected me to fold, to sign quietly, to disappear. But sitting in that motel room, surrounded by boxes of what he decided I deserved, something shifted. I stopped trying to sound reasonable. I stopped apologizing for existing. If I was going to lose everything anyway, I wasn't going to lose without being heard. So I made the decision he never thought I would. I chose to represent myself. And when I walked into that courtroom days later with nothing in my name and no one at my side, he laughed. What he didn't know was that I had already stopped being afraid. I didn't notice her at first. Not really. She sat in the last row of the courtroom, slightly off to the side. Plain coat, neutral posture, not watching the judge, not watching my husband, watching me. While everyone else reacted, to the lawyers, to the laughter, to the arguments, she stayed still. Her eyes didn't move when my husband laughed. They didn't flicker when the judge spoke. They followed me. After the hearing adjourned, I gathered my papers slowly. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. I could hear my husband behind me, joking quietly with his attorneys, relieved, confident. As I turned toward the exit, the woman stood. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. "Excuse me," she said softly. Her voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't aggressive either, just calm. "I know this isn't the right place," she continued, "but may I have a moment?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no, to protect what little space I had left. But something about her tone stopped me. We stepped into the hallway outside the courtroom. The doors closed behind us, muting the sound of voices and footsteps. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said it. "I was married to him before you." The words didn't land all at once. Before I could respond, she added, "Or at least, that's what I thought we were." She told me her name, then her story. Different years, different city, same pattern. He had been charming, generous at first, insistent on handling everything. She'd trusted him too. He moved money she didn't know about, asked her to sign papers she didn't fully understand, told people she was unstable when she started asking questions. When she tried to fight back, she lost. Not because she was wrong, but because she was alone. "They made me look unreasonable," she said quietly, emotional, difficult. Her mouth tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. "I didn't know the rules," she continued, "and by the time I learned them, it was too late." I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. I'm not here for revenge, she said. I already paid that price. She paused. I'm here because when he laughed today, I realized he still thinks this works. She reached into her bag but didn't pull anything out. Whatever he's telling the court, she said, he's told it before. I finally spoke. Why are you telling me this? She met my eyes. Because I stayed silent, she said, and he counted on that. Her voice lowered. Don't do what I did. The hallway felt colder. I don't have power, she added. No money, no influence. Then she leaned in slightly. But I remember everything. She handed me a piece of paper, a phone number, nothing else. When you're ready, she said, call me. Then she walked away. Back down the hall, out of sight. Behind the courtroom doors, I could still hear my husband laughing, but for the first time since the divorce began, I wasn't alone anymore, and he had no idea that someone who survived him was standing just behind me. I didn't call her right away. For 2 days, her number sat folded in my coat pocket. I took it out at night, put it back in the morning, because calling her meant accepting something I wasn't ready to face yet, that my marriage wasn't a failure. It was a design. When I finally called, she answered on the second ring. I was wondering when you would, she said. We met at a quiet cafe off the highway, the kind of place no one stays long enough to be remembered. She didn't bring documents. She didn't bring proof. She brought memory. He starts by simplifying, she said. Bills, accounts, decisions. I nodded. Then he isolates, she continued. Not all at once, just enough that you stop comparing notes with anyone else. I felt the words settle into place. He always uses the same phrases, she said. I'm protecting you. You don't need to worry. Let me handle it. They were the exact words he had used on me. She traced an invisible line on the table with her finger. Then comes the pivot, she said, when you start asking questions. I knew that moment, the shift in his tone, the disappointment, the way concern turned into documentation. He never accuses you directly, she said. He lets other people do that for him. Friends, lawyers, bank representatives, who suddenly spoke slower when addressing me. He positions himself as reasonable, she continued, and you as unpredictable. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Did you ever see the money? She nodded. Not all of it, but enough to know it didn't vanish. She described transfers between accounts, short-term holdings, money that moved just before key dates, tax filings, property purchases, court deadlines, always just in time, always just out of reach. He never takes everything, she said. That would look suspicious. I leaned back in my chair. He leaves enough, she added, so you sound ungrateful if you complain. That was when I understood. Why the settlement offer felt generous to outsiders. Why refusing it made me look unreasonable. It wasn't generosity. It was camouflage. She looked at me carefully. You're the first one who didn't disappear, she said. The first one who showed up without asking permission. I didn't feel brave. I felt late. He assumes you'll get tired, she said. Confused, scared. She reached into her bag then, not dramatically, just matter of fact. I kept notes, she said. Dates, conversations, things that felt wrong. She didn't slide them across the table. Not yet. I'm not giving these to you today, she said. I need to know you understand what this means. I met her eyes. If I use this, I said slowly, he won't stop at intimidation. She nodded. He never does. The cafe felt smaller, louder. This isn't about winning a divorce, she said. It's about exposing a system he believes no one sees. I thought of the courtroom, the laughter, the confidence. I'm ready, I said. She studied my face for a moment. Then she reached into her bag again and placed a thin notebook on the table between us. Then we start with the timeline, she said. And for the first time since everything had been taken from me, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building something, quietly, carefully. And if we were right, His smile wouldn't just fade, it would collapse. We didn't talk about revenge, not once. What we talked about was procedure, deadlines, disclosure rules, what could be requested, what had to be proven. She never told me what to feel. She told me what to read. Family law statutes, prior cases, financial disclosure requirements. At night, my motel room turned into a classroom. The bed stayed unmade. Paperwork spread across the desk. My laptop hummed until dawn. I learned how courts think, not emotionally, structurally. I learned that judges don't react to outrage. They react to inconsistencies. I learned that accusations without a timeline sound like resentment, but facts, arranged in order, sound like truth. Every night I rewrote the same list: dates, amounts, movements, when money left one account, when a property changed hands, when a document was signed. She called it mapping the behavior. He didn't improvise, she said. He repeated. The more I studied, the clearer it became. My husband wasn't reckless. He was meticulous. That was his weakness. We practiced questions, not arguments, simple ones. Can you confirm the date? Is this account listed on your disclosure? Why does this transfer appear after the filing deadline? No accusations, no raised voice, just precision. I started attending hearings early, sitting in the back, listening. I watched how judges interrupted lawyers who rambled, how they leaned forward when something didn't align. I noticed what irritated them, not emotion, waste. By the time the next hearing arrived, my fear had changed shape. It wasn't gone, but it was organized. In court, my husband didn't look at me anymore. He looked bored, like I was a formality. His lawyer spoke confidently, dismissively. I listened, and I waited. When the judge finally nodded at me, I stood, slowly. I didn't speak right away. I placed one document on the podium, just one. Your Honor, I said, may I ask a clarification question before we proceed? The lawyer opened his mouth to object. The judge raised a hand. Go ahead, I turned to my husband's attorney. Is this account included in your client's sworn financial disclosure? He glanced down. Yes, I flipped the page. Then can you explain why the transfer date on this statement occurs 12 days after the disclosure was filed? The room shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. The lawyer frowned. That appears to be a routine transaction, he said. I nodded. That's what I thought too, I said, until I noticed it happened 3 times, each time right after a court deadline. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain. I let the silence work. The judge leaned forward. My husband sat up straighter. For the first time, he wasn't smiling. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through calm, careful. You don't need to do this the hard way, he said. We can settle. I didn't call back because I finally understood something. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of a pattern being seen. And once a judge sees a pattern, the game changes, quietly, irreversibly. The next hearing was scheduled for a full afternoon, long enough for mistakes, long enough for pressure to show. The courtroom was more crowded this time. A few observers, 2 junior associates from his legal team, a court reporter who typed without looking up. My husband walked in smiling again. Not wide, measured. The kind of smile you wear when you believe damage control is already in motion. Settlement papers sat neatly in his lawyer's folder. I didn't look at them. The judge called the case. We rose, and this time, something was different. The judge didn't start with their argument. He started with questions. Counsel, he said, tapping the file, I have concerns regarding the timing of several financial disclosures. The lawyer responded quickly. Your Honor, all disclosures were made in good faith. I could feel my husband's eyes on me now, not amused, assessing. The judge nodded. Then we should have no trouble clarifying, he said. Let's proceed under oath. That word landed hard. Under oath. My husband straightened in his seat. The lawyer turned to him, whispering, Too fast, too quiet. He took the stand, hand raised, voice steady. I stayed seated. Let him talk. He answered routine questions first. Name, occupation, years married, confident again. Then the judge looked at me. "Ms. Carter," he said, "you may ask your questions." I stood. I didn't rush. I walked to the podium and placed 3 documents down. "Good afternoon," I said. My husband smiled thinly. "Good afternoon," he replied. I began with the safest ground. "You manage the household finances, correct?" "Yes." "And you've done so throughout our marriage?" "Yes." I nodded. "And you understand that these disclosures were submitted under penalty of perjury?" He hesitated. "Of course." I picked up the first document. "Can you confirm this transfer?" I asked. "From your primary account to a holding account on March 12th? "Yes." "And the disclosure filing date was March 1st? "That's correct." I paused. "So this transfer was not included in your sworn disclosure?" The lawyer stood. "Objection!" The judge raised a hand. "Overruled." My husband's jaw tightened. "It was a routine transfer," he said, "temporary." I nodded again. "Then let's look at the next one." I placed the second document down. "April 8th, I said. "Another transfer, also after a filing deadline." I could hear typing accelerate behind me. "And the third," I continued, sliding the last page forward, "June 2nd. The room went quiet. Not dramatic. Focused. I looked at him. "Can you explain why all 3 transfers occurred immediately after court deadlines?" He glanced at his lawyer, then back at me. "It's coincidence." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. "Is it also coincidence," I asked, "that the funds returned to the original account before the next disclosure each time?" His smile was gone now. His lawyer shifted his weight. The judge leaned forward. "Answer the question," he said. My husband swallowed. "Yes," he said. "They returned." I stepped back. "No further questions," I said. The judge didn't dismiss him immediately. He looked at the documents again, slowly. Then he looked up. "This court will require supplemental disclosures," he said, "immediately." My husband nodded stiffly. The hearing adjourned. As people stood and gathered their things, I felt it, not victory, momentum. When I passed my husband in the aisle, he didn't look at me, not once. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered this time. His voice was controlled, but strained. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. I listened. "You don't know who you're playing with," he added. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I do now," I said. And I hung up, because the courtroom had changed, and so had the rules. The silence didn't break right away. After the hearing ended, people filed out as if everything were normal. Folders closed, chairs pushed back. But something had shifted. I felt it in the way the clerk avoided my husband's eyes, in how his lawyer spoke quieter than before. The judge hadn't ruled yet, but he had noticed. That was enough. 2 days later, the supplemental disclosures arrived. Thick, neatly tabbed, impressive at first glance. That's how they're designed. I spread them across the motel desk that night, page by page, numbers, dates, signatures. At 2:14 a.m., I found it. Not a missing account, not a hidden property, a footnote, 3 lines long, a holding account listed as inactive, closed, according to the document, the previous year. But the routing number was familiar. Too familiar. I cross-checked it against an old statement I had saved years ago. One he'd told me to throw away. The account wasn't inactive. It had been renamed. Same routing number, different label. I didn't sleep. By morning, I had printed screenshots, statements, and a timeline so simple it almost felt insulting. At the next hearing, I waited until the end. Let the lawyers speak. Let my husband regain his composure. When the judge finally looked at me, I stood. "Your Honor," I said, "I believe there is a discrepancy in the supplemental disclosure." The lawyer sighed softly, confident again. "What discrepancy?" the judge asked. I walked to the podium and placed a single page down. "This account," I said, pointing, "is listed as inactive." "Yes," the lawyer replied quickly. "It was closed last year." I nodded. "Then could you explain why funds were transferred through it 3 weeks ago?" The courtroom froze. The lawyer frowned. "That's not possible," he said. I slid the second page forward. "The routing number matches," I said. "So does the transaction code." My husband shifted in his seat. The judge leaned in. "Counsel?" he said. The lawyer flipped pages faster now. Too fast. "It appears," he said carefully, "there may be a clerical error." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The judge looked at my husband. "Sir," he said, "did you authorize transactions through an account you represented as inactive?" My husband opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. "Yes," he said, "but it was temporary." The court reporter stopped typing. The judge removed his glasses. "This court does not take kindly to relabeled assets," he said evenly, "or incomplete disclosures." My husband's face had lost all color. I could feel eyes on me now, not pity, not curiosity, attention. The judge continued. "I am ordering a full forensic accounting," he said, "and until that is complete, no assets are to be moved." He paused. "Violation of this order will carry consequences." The gavel came down, harder this time. As we stood to leave, my husband finally looked at me, not angry, not mocking, afraid, because the detail he thought no one would notice had been seen. And once the truth starts surfacing in court, it doesn't stop where you want it to. It keeps going. The shift was immediate, not in court, outside of it. That's how he always worked. The first call came from my sister. Her voice was careful, too careful. "He reached out," she said. "He's concerned about you." Concerned. That word again. She said he told her I was under a lot of stress, that the court process was taking a toll, that he was worried I was being influenced by outside voices. I knew exactly what that meant. By the end of the week, it wasn't just her. A mutual friend asked if I was okay. Another suggested I consider mediation before things get ugly. Ugly. I could feel the net tightening. Then my phone rang. This time it wasn't an unknown number. It was her, the woman from the back row. "I think he knows about me," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. She explained what had happened. A voicemail left on her office phone. No threats, no raised voice, just a reminder of how much she had lost last time. "He didn't say my name," she said, "but he didn't have to." That night, she didn't answer my follow-up texts. By morning, her number went straight to voicemail. For the first time since the case began, fear crept back in. Not for me, for her. At the next hearing, my husband arrived early, confident again, collected, as if the court order had never happened. His lawyer requested a brief recess. The judge agreed. Then the motion came. They wanted a psychological evaluation, not mandatory, precautionary. The words were chosen carefully, based on recent behavior, based on unusual decisions, based on concerns raised by close family members. I stood there listening, hands clenched. This wasn't about evidence. It was about credibility. If they could make me look unstable, nothing I said would matter. The judge didn't rule immediately. He asked questions instead. And that hesitation, that pause, was the most dangerous part. When the hearing ended, I walked out alone. No messages, no missed calls, just silence. That night, I sat on the motel bed staring at the wall again. Same room, same smell. For a moment, it felt like everything was about to collapse. Then my phone buzzed, a single text from a number I didn't recognize. "Don't stop, this is when he panics." I exhaled for the first time all day. He wasn't just fighting me now. He was trying to erase witnesses, trying to rewrite the story before it could be finished. But intimidation only works when you don't understand the pattern. And now I did. He was escalating, which meant he was running out of room. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I was thinking. Fear makes you freeze. Thinking makes you dangerous. By morning, I understood what he was doing. The psychological evaluation wasn't about my mental health. It was about time. Delay the case, drain my energy, force me to defend myself instead of the evidence. That was his real strategy. I met her the next afternoon, not at the cafe, not anywhere predictable. We sat in her car parked 2 blocks away from the courthouse. Windows cracked, engine off. "He's done this before," she said, right after discovery starts to bite. She didn't sound shaken anymore. She sounded focused. "When they can't discredit the documents," she continued, "they discredit the person holding them." I nodded. "That's why you don't react," she said. "You redirect." She pulled out the notebook again. This time, she opened it. Inside were dates, names, handwritten notes from years ago, not emotional entries, observations. "When he pushed for evaluations," she said, "it was always after a forensic accountant got involved." I looked up. "Always?" I asked. She nodded. "That's the tell." I felt something click into place. The evaluation wasn't the attack. It was the distraction. He wanted the court focused on me while he cleaned up what the accounting would expose. That was the mistake. Because for the first time, I wasn't going to respond on his timeline. At the next hearing, I didn't argue the motion. I acknowledged it, calmly. "I have no objection to transparency," I said, "but I request the same standard be applied." The judge looked up. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I'm requesting a reciprocal evaluation," I said, "limited to financial conduct and disclosure integrity." The courtroom went still. His lawyer blinked. "That's not standard," he said quickly. "Neither is mislabeling active accounts," I replied. The judge leaned back. "I'll consider it," he said. That was all I needed. Outside the courtroom, my husband finally approached me. Up close. Too close. "You're embarrassing yourself," he said quietly. "This won't end the way you think." I looked at him. Really looked. Not the husband I once trusted. The man in front of me. "I know," I said. "It's already ending differently." He smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes, because he had realized something too. I wasn't trying to survive the process anymore. I was steering it. And when you take control of the timeline, every lie starts to surface on its own. The forensic accountant didn't look like someone about to ruin a life. No drama, no intensity, just a gray suit and a stack of files placed neatly on the table. He spoke slowly, carefully, as if each word had been weighed before it was allowed into the room. The judge listened without interrupting. So did everyone else. The first issue was simple. The account labeled inactive, the accountant said, was not inactive. He turned a page. It was renamed. My husband's lawyer shifted in his chair. The accountant continued. The routing number remained unchanged. The account received deposits during periods immediately following court filing deadlines. No one spoke. Then came the second layer. There are multiple holding entities, he said, structured to temporarily park funds before disclosure dates. He pointed to the timeline. The same dates, the same pattern. Not once, repeatedly. The judge leaned forward. These entities, the accountant added, appear to be designed to create the illusion of compliance. Illusion. That word echoed in my chest. My husband finally spoke. "This is being taken out of context," he said. "These are standard financial practices." The accountant didn't react. "Standard practices," he replied evenly, "do not involve misrepresenting asset status under oath." That was when I felt it. The shift. The room wasn't watching me anymore. They were watching him. The accountant moved to the third section. Additionally, he said, there is evidence of coordinated legal strategy across multiple prior cases. My breath caught. Prior cases. The judge looked up sharply. "What prior cases?" he asked. The accountant nodded once. "Similar marital dissolution proceedings," he said, "with comparable asset movement patterns." My husband's face hardened. The lawyer stood. Your Honor, this line of discussion— Sit down, the judge said quietly. The accountant continued. These patterns suggest not a single oversight but a repeated method. Method. That was the word I had been waiting for. I glanced toward the back of the courtroom. She was there, still, watching. The accountant concluded. Based on my analysis, he said, the likelihood of intentional concealment is significant. The judge removed his glasses. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at my husband. This court will not tolerate deception, he said, especially not systemic deception. My husband opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since the divorce began, he had nothing ready. The judge ordered expanded discovery, subpoenas, a full review of associated entities. The gavel came down, and when it did, I knew something had changed forever. Not because I had won, but because the truth, once exposed, was no longer mine to carry alone. It belonged to the court now, and the court does not forget. The change didn't happen in the courtroom. It happened in the days after. That was when he stopped acting like a man who expected to win and started acting like a man who needed time. Too much time. His lawyer called first, polite, measured. We believe it's in everyone's best interest to revisit settlement discussions, he said. Revisit? As if this were a misunderstanding, as if nothing had just been uncovered under oath. The offer arrived an hour later. Generous, sudden, more money, faster resolution, a confidentiality clause thick enough to choke on. I read it once. Then again, he wasn't offering peace. He was buying silence. That same afternoon, the forensic accountant called, quiet urgency in his voice. Has your husband traveled recently? He asked. I froze. I don't know, I said. There have been several inquiries, he continued. Requests for accelerated document transfers and account closures. Closures, not reorganizations. Closures. That night, I sat on the motel bed again, laptop open, heart steady. Patterns don't panic. People do. The next morning, the court issued a temporary restraining order on all marital and related assets. No movement, no transfers, no exceptions. My husband didn't show up to the next scheduled meeting. His lawyer did, alone. He's unavailable today, the lawyer said carefully. Unavailable. The judge didn't respond right away. He flipped through the file instead. Slowly, deliberately. Counsel? He said at last. Your client was ordered to cooperate fully with discovery. Yes, Your Honor, the lawyer replied. Then you may want to remind him, the judge said, that noncompliance carries consequences beyond this court. The room felt tight. Afterward, my phone buzzed. A message from a private number. We can still fix this. You don't want to drag this out. I stared at the screen. Then I deleted it. Because the truth was clear now. He wasn't trying to negotiate. He was trying to escape. And escape looks suspicious when you're already under a microscope. That evening, she called me. Not the calm voice from before. Sharper. He contacted someone from my past, she said. Asked questions he shouldn't be asking. My chest tightened. He's checking exits, she added, which means the pressure is working. I looked out the motel window. Cars passing. Normal lives continuing. He thinks this is still about you and him, she said. I shook my head. It's not, I said. And that was the moment it fully settled. This case had grown larger than a divorce, larger than a marriage. It was about exposure. And once a man like him realizes the system is no longer protecting him, he doesn't fight fair. He runs. But running leaves footprints. And the court was already following them. Once a man starts running, you don't chase him. You decide where he's going to trip. We stopped reacting to his moves. No more scrambling, no more late-night panic. Everything became deliberate. The forensic accountant mapped the flow of money, not just where it went, but where it had to go next. Accounts don't vanish. They reroute. We identified the choke points. Moments where he had no choice but to touch the system again. Those were the moments that mattered. The court scheduled a consolidated hearing, one day, all issues, asset disclosure, compliance, intent. He had to appear. There was no avoiding it. In the days leading up to the hearing, I prepared my presentation, not an argument, a timeline. I stripped it down to the essentials. No adjectives, no emotion, just dates, actions, consequences. I practiced reading it aloud until my voice stayed steady, even when my hands didn't. She helped me refine it, not by adding, by removing. Let the pattern speak, she said. Judges don't need persuasion, they need clarity. We arranged the evidence in layers. The first showed inconsistency. The second showed repetition. The third showed intent. If the first didn't land, the second would. If the second failed, the third would crush him. We prepared witnesses, not dramatic ones, technical ones, people with nothing to gain and nothing to lose. The night before the hearing, I slept. Not well, but enough. Because fear had turned into focus. The morning of the hearing, the courtroom filled quickly. Reporters in the back, notepads out. This wasn't routine anymore. When my husband walked in, he didn't smile. He looked thinner, older. The confidence was gone. The judge opened the session. This court intends to resolve all outstanding matters today, he said. My husband's lawyer shifted. I stood when my name was called. This time, I didn't feel small. I placed the first exhibit on the screen, a simple chart, dates on the left, accounts on the right. Your Honor, I said, this is not a mistake. It is a sequence. The room was silent. As I moved through the timeline, I could feel it. Every step narrowing his options. By the time I reached the final slide, there was nowhere left to hide. I didn't look at him when I finished. I looked at the judge. No further questions, I said. And as I stepped back, I realized something. This wasn't a defense anymore. It was a reckoning. The courtroom didn't breathe. Not while the judge studied the screen. Not while the lawyers stared at their notes, suddenly unsure which page could save them. My husband sat perfectly still. Too still. The judge turned to his counsel. Do you dispute this timeline? He asked. The lawyer stood slowly. Your Honor, he began, there are alternative explanations. For which you have no documentation, the judge replied. Silence. Then the judge did something I didn't expect. He looked at me. Ms. Carter, he said, you referenced similar patterns in prior proceedings. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. And you believe this conduct extends beyond this marriage? I do, I said. He leaned back. Call your witness. The sound of the door opening echoed in the room. She walked in, the woman from the back row. No hesitation, no dramatics. She took the stand like someone who had rehearsed the truth for years. State your name. She did. Her voice didn't shake. She explained how she met him, how he handled the finances, how documents changed after deadlines. The same words, the same structure, different years. My husband's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Then came the second reference. Not in person, in records. Another name, another case. The forensic accountant confirmed it. Same asset movement, he said. Same timing. My husband's face drained. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently. The lawyer didn't respond. The judge removed his glasses. This court is concerned, he said slowly, that what we are seeing is not negligence, but design. Design. That word landed like a verdict. He turned to my husband. Sir, he said, did you believe this behavior would remain invisible? My husband opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no explanation. The judge continued. Multiple women, multiple proceedings, identical methods. He paused. This is not coincidence. The courtroom murmured. Not loud, but enough. The judge looked at the clerk. I am referring this matter for further investigation, he said. Federal. The word wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. My husband finally looked at me. Not with anger, not with contempt, with fear. Because the smile he had worn so easily, the one that had carried him through every room, every negotiation, was gone. And it wasn't coming back. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The record will reflect, he said, that this court finds sufficient cause to expand the scope of review. Every word landed cleanly, final. He signed the order without looking up. Subpoenas, bank records, corporate filings, all of it. My husband's lawyer finally spoke, but his voice lacked conviction now. Your Honor, we request a brief recess. No, the judge said, one syllable, enough. The bailiff shifted near the door, not dramatic, just present. That was when I saw it in my husband's eyes. The calculation, not how do I win, but how much time do I have left? The judge continued. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, he said, I am referring this matter to federal authorities for further investigation. There it was. No longer implied, no longer avoidable. My husband's shoulders slumped. For years, he had hidden behind complexity, behind paperwork, behind people paid to speak for him. None of that mattered now. Federal agents didn't rush in. They never do. They waited. Outside the courtroom. When the hearing adjourned, my husband stood slowly. No smile, no anger. Just a man realizing the game he mastered had finally turned against him. As he reached the aisle, two men stepped forward. Plain suits, no badges shown, quiet words exchanged, a hand lightly on his arm. He didn't resist. He didn't look at me. Because for the first time, there was nothing he could say that would change the outcome. The courtroom emptied quickly after that. People avoid scenes like this. They don't like seeing power stripped in real time. I stayed seated, hands folded, breathing steady. She came to stand beside me. It's over, she said. I shook my head. No, I replied. It's finished. There's a difference. Outside, the sky was clear, too normal for a day like this. As I walked down the courthouse steps, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release, because justice didn't arrive loudly. It arrived methodically, relentlessly, and it didn't stop until there was nothing left for him to hide behind. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a sound I didn't expect. Soft. Not a slam. Not an echo. Just done. For years, I had imagined this moment as loud, dramatic, victorious. It wasn't. I stood at the bottom of the steps and felt the sun on my face. Warm, ordinary. And somehow that made it better. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't open, updates, questions, voices that hadn't mattered when I was invisible. Inside the building, the system kept moving. Investigations, reviews, consequences that no longer needed me to push them forward. The truth had momentum now. She stood beside me for a moment, then turned to leave. Thank you, I said. She shook her head. No, she replied. You were the first one who stayed. I watched her walk away, lighter than when I first saw her in that back row. I didn't feel like I had won a war. I felt like I had ended a cycle. He laughed because he thought I was alone, because he believed silence meant weakness, because he mistook control for intelligence. What he never understood was that the truth doesn't need volume. It needs placement. And once it's placed, in the right order, at the right time, in front of the right people, it stands on its own. I didn't walk out of that courtroom with revenge. I walked out with my name, my voice, my future. And that was something no one could ever take from me again.